I do have one more question. So with the disappearance of Anne, as well as with the disappearance of Adam Walsh, how did ECHO first address these needs? I know you said as a forum and we are volunteer based, but were we going out and finding kids? How was that started? And then for the now purposes, how has it changed over time?
You want any of us to answer?
Yes, please.
One of the first ways that ECHO worked to help missing children was that we started the Search and Recovery Fund. And that was a fund of money that was set aside specifically to help families whose children were missing. And we got referrals from the police department, from Child Protective Services, from counseling agencies, the Center for Women and Families. And we would get a phone call from these people frequently telling us that their child had been found, but they were out of town and they needed to get to that location to recover their child. And our fund would pay for a bus ticket or an airline ticket and hotels if need be, and to help those families go recover their missing children. And Rosie and another volunteer, Irv Klein, were the committee. The calls would come in and I would get them, and Rosie and Irv would get on a phone call with me and we would discuss the situation and decide what ECHO could do to help those families.
Yeah. Again, we still, as an organization today, we still have the original picture and poster of Ann Gotlib, because I want to continue honoring her and making sure that my staff also knows the purpose and the reason as to why that you are here. We no longer do, missing searches or anything of that nature, just for the simple factor that there's other systems that have been put in place that can handle that, in a more sufficient way than what we can have the capability of doing right now. But as a resource in the community, we still too get what we call crisis calls from parents, from educators that may have a situation or an incident with a child, and they still lean upon ECHO as far as what are the next steps? Who do I go to? What are the resources that you can provide to me? And so many times we handle those. Ariel Powell, which is my director of programs and community outreach, we listen to those calls together collectively so that we don't miss anything. When someone is going through that incident of trauma, you have to know that their message is not going to always come out the way that we want to hear it. So being able to have collective ears so that we can hear everything and not miss anything, that is still very important. And we document, and then we reach out to our community partners. If we are unable to provide that resource, we make those referrals. We never want to leave a parent or an adult hanging out there with no resource, no opportunity to engage with us as far as in conversation. So we are still continuing that work to make sure that we are still an advocate for children and for families.
I think I have a unique overview of some of how it changed, because Lucy reached out to me in the 90s somewhere. There was a big federal grant that we were participating in from ECHO with Family and Children's, and I think Home of the Innocents and a few other agencies. And she wanted some advisory council people. And that was my first attachment other than that phone call. And at that time, and not long after that, couple of years, I guess I was asked on the board, and I said, sure, because I had the understanding from what I'd done. I cared about it, and I had been learning and taking a lot of workshops, professionally to deal clinically with all the issues. So I was in much better shape, I felt, to help out. But at that time, most of what we did with young children was volunteer-led. I think all of it, right? Except for maybe one or two things. And, we had a base of volunteers that were very committed and who taught the different age groups. I remember that. And because I came in and I went to the programming aspect, the little programming committee with a few other board members. So we kind of looked at all that. And what's changed over the 30 years, the whole landscape has changed. The focus on child abuse and more professionalism and more forensics and a whole lot of things have changed. So the organization plus the volunteer world has changed, and people don't readily volunteer, because of changes in the workforce and whatever. So I've seen that transition from all volunteer to where we are now, which is hired professional, trained people, and volunteers help out. But the staff are now the ones who go into the schools and who train the parents and who train, the children, and who go out and do a lot of speaking, and the volunteers have a different role. So it's been an interesting transition, to watch, and it's really neat to see the teamwork, though, and how the professionals that you started with, who met with you, who were interested back in the 80s, how some of those people are still deeply involved, whether it's a judge or it's an attorney, a Commonwealth attorney, or any family lawyer, or a social worker like me, or a therapist, and how the network has grown that way.
And I do know, because again, I wanted this to be more organic as well. I do know there's a connection with ECHO and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So I want to make sure that individuals know that we have a connection with that organization. And I think, Lucy, you mentioned that to me. Someone mentioned that to me when I first came on board. And so if someone could just talk about what that connection was.
I'm glad you brought that up, because Ernie Allen, who when ECHO was first organized, was the director of the Crime Commission. Okay. And he was the one, he's an attorney, and he's the one that wrote up the Articles of Incorporation and the 501c3 status and all those things that I knew nothing about. And he definitely deserves a shout out. And Ernie became the first director of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So there's a strong Louisville connection between ECHO and other Louisville youth organizations and advocacy groups and the National Center.
Wasn't there a national organization prior to the center? Because I remember there were other places like us in Texas and Canada, and you were part of that, right? The executive directors?
It wasn't before the National Center. After the National Center was formed, I did work with a group that eventually became known as the Association for Missing and Exploited Children's Organizations, or we called it AMICO. And I was on the original board of AMICO, and there were organizations similar to ECHO all over the country. And this was a way for us all to get together and meet together and get to know each other and network with each other.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes.
One of the things that the National Center did for me, and does for other clinicians, it still exists, and is that they have a family advocacy arm. And if you're somebody who works with children and who works with child abuse and sexual abuse, and in the field, you can fill out your paperwork and ask to become a member of their network. And the network exists throughout the country. So I know there are several people in Kentucky. I was accepted, and we have several now who are actively working now that I'm retired. But the National Center can call us if they're looking for resources for a family in Kentucky or for a person to treat a child, who's been found elsewhere. And they do a lot of training, and they occasionally offer workshops, but they do a lot of web trainings now, which are really invaluable, to somebody working with the kids and with the parents. So it's another aspect of them. Yeah.